Hello everyone and welcome to another BlenderMadeEasy tutorial. Today I'll be creating this procedural chain link fence using geometry nodes. Since this is going to be a procedural fence, that means you can change the height of it, how many horizontal and vertical poles there are. You can also change the thickness of the individual chains, and you can extrude it out to create whatever shape and size that you want. There are not that many nodes to set up in this node tree as you can see here, so let's go ahead and jump straight into it. The first thing I'll do is of course delete the default cube. Then we're going to add in a new object. This is going to be a Bezier curve. Go into edit mode and we need to make sure the type is set over to vector. So press V and select vector. Now there's going to be no smoothing along the curves as you can see here. Go into front view and rotate it 90 degrees so it's horizontal. Then we need to extrude these 2 points out. Select the top point and extrude it out 1 grid unit to the left. And then do the same thing on the bottom, except we're going to extrude it out to the right. So now we have this shape. Make sure these points are in the correct spot. Then we're going to rotate this 45 degrees so it's at this angle. Next up, we're going to go into edit mode and select this point, and we're going to convert it back over to a curved point so this corner actually has some smoothing. We're going to press V and switch it over to automatic, and then scale it down and so it's a little bit of a tighter point, something like that. We'll do the same thing up here. We'll select this point, click on V and then select automatic. We'll scale it down and drag this one up so they're about the same size. Something like that looks pretty good. Then at this point, we'll go back into edit mode, select everything and press Shift D and drag it over. We're going to press Control M and we're going to mirror it along the X direction. So click on X and then drag it over this way. This is going to be the shape of every single chain link in our fence. The next step that we need to do is rotate these points, because currently if we were to add thickness to all of these curves, you're going to have some clipping over here and then over here as well. To fix this, we need to rotate them. I'm going to go into edit mode, select the point on the right, and then select this point as well. We're going to hit R, then X, and then we're going to go -90, but you can see they're rotating together. So let's switch the pivot point over to individual origins. Then we're going to rotate it 45 degrees along the X direction right about there. That looks pretty good. We need to do the exact opposite on the other side. So we will select this point and then rotate them along the -X direction, 45 degrees right about there. Looks pretty good. And as you can see here, these chains are actually rotating around each other, and that is what we want. The next step is we need to make sure this is the correct size, because currently we can see here it's about 3 meters tall, which is a very, very tall chain. We're going to scale this down quite a bit. To actually get some reference, we can add in a new cube. If we take a look at real chain links in real life, you can see the square is about 2 inches, or if you're not from the US, it's about 5.08 centimeters. So let's add that into the dimensions for this new cube so we can see the size. We're going to go 5.08 and then type in cm and enter. And we'll zoom in here, we'll rotate this so it's at a 45-degree angle as you can see. Then we will scale this object down and place it right inside this cube. Something like that is perfect. The next step is we need to rotate this just like this so it's at a horizontal angle. Then go into edit mode. We're going to move everything so the origin point is at the bottom of this curve. So right about there looks pretty good. Then a very important step is you need to press Control A and apply the scale, and then make sure you apply the rotation as well. So press Control A and apply the rotation. Now that we've set up our object, we're going to add in one more object. This is going to be another Bezier curve. We're going to go into edit mode, press V, and then select vector. This object here is going to control the shape of our chain link fence, so we can drag it out so it's a little bit longer, just like that. Let's actually rename these objects so we know what they are. We will call this fence line, and then the curve right here, which is the chain itself, we're going to call this chain. Now we have our object set up. Let's go into the geometry nodes and start adding in a bunch of nodes. To do this, we're going to click and drag in the top right to drag out a new window, and then we're going to switch it over to the geometry node workspace. I'm going to add in a new object as well. Let's just add in another cube, and then we're going to give it a new geometry nodes node tree. Get rid of this because we're not going to need it. And what we're going to do first is bring in those two objects. We can do this by clicking and dragging the fence line into here, and then the chain as well into here, just like that. Another handy tip is if you click on this button on the top here, it's going to prevent this window from disappearing. So now if we select another object, you can see the node tree is still here, which is very useful. Alright, so the first node that we're going to add is a mesh primitive, and then select mesh line, and we'll place it right here. What we're going to do is we're going to take this and plug it into the geometry, and we can see here is the effect. The other thing that we're going to do is add in instances. So we'll click on instances and then instances on points. Then we're going to take the fence line, which is the curve on the bottom, and we're going to instance that. So if we plug that in right here, we can see this is the effect that we're getting. Currently, the height is way too much. We can control this height by changing the offset. If we were to drag this down, those points, those 10 points right here, are going to become a lot closer. So the next step is we need to figure out the height that we need to place here. The height is the exact height of this chain object. So for the dimensions, select the Z, press Ctrl C to copy, and then paste it in right here. And as you can see, it's now the exact height of this chain link. What we can do now is instance that chain link on every single one of these points. To do this, we're going to select the instances on points, press Shift D, and place it here. Then we're going to take the chain, plug it into the instances, and this is the effect that we get. But as you can see, you're going to notice that there's only two instances, one on this side and one on this side. To fix that, we're going to resample this curve line. We're going to press Shift A, go over to curve, and then click on resample. This is going to allow us to add in more points. If we drag this up, you can see more points are being added. But this isn't really going to work because we're going to have to constantly change this count. What we can do instead is switch it over to length. So for every 0.1 meters, there's going to be a new point. And you probably guessed what we're going to do. We're going to select the chain link, go over to the X dimension, which is 0.78, Ctrl C to copy, and then paste it in for this resample. So for every 0.8 meters, there's going to be a new point, which means another chain link. And as you can see, they are all connected now, which is really cool. At this point, you can select the curve line and drag it outwards, and it's going to automatically update in real time. One thing that we need to fix though is this mesh line. This 0.36 meters is not the number that we want. Because if I zoom in here, you're going to see it's exactly at the top of this other chain. We want it to be slightly below it so it actually wraps around. So instead of doing this number, we're going to drag it down just slightly. Let's go with a value of 0.067 and enter. And as you can see here, they're a little bit below, which is what we want. If you want to change the height of this fence, all you have to do is bring up the count. Now that we have our fence working properly, let's add in some thickness to all of the chains. To do this, we're going to add in a curve and then a curve to mesh. We'll place it right here over by the chain. We have here an option for the profile curve, which allows us to add in any object to be the profile. And the object we're going to add is a curve and then a curve circle. Take this value and plug it into the profile of the curve. And as you can see, we now have some thickness. The radius we're going to drag down to 0.09 and enter. And as you can see there, that is looking really nice. If we were to extrude this point out to give it our fence a little more shape, you're going to notice these are not rotated the correct way. That's because they're following the exact rotation of the original chain object. To fix it, to actually rotate it along this curve, what we need to do is add in a new node. We're going to go over to Utilities and then click on Align Euler to Vector. We're going to take the rotation, plug it into the rotation of the instances. Then to actually take the information from the curve to align it properly, we're going to add in a curve and then click on Curve Tangent. This basically gives us the information that we need to rotate it the correct way. We're going to plug it into the vector, and as you can see there, it automatically fixed it, and now they are rotated the correct way. Now before we continue on creating this chain link fence, I wanted to take a moment and let you know that if you wanted to take the default cube in Blender and turn it into a beautiful modern house scene, you can do that by checking out my class over on Skillshare. In this class, we go from start to finish and learn the entire process. We go over the modeling, the texturing, materials, particle systems, all of that, and then we end up with this nice final scene. You can check out this class for free because Skillshare is actually sponsoring this video. If for some reason you don't know what Skillshare is by now, it's an online platform with thousands of professionally taught classes on every topic that you can think of. There are also a lot of Blender classes as well, and 9 of those are taught by yours truly. So here's the deal that I have for you today. The first 1,000 people to use the link in the description will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. This means you have access to everything on their platform and there are no ads, so you can study and learn uninterrupted. So go ahead, click the link in the description and start learning something new today. Feel free to check out my classes on there as well and let me know what you think of them. And thanks again to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back into the tutorial. The next step in this tutorial is we're going to add in some cylinders along every endpoint of this fence. So we're going to have one here, one down here, and then one on the end. This is actually very easy to do. What we'll do is we will select the fence line, this mesh line, and the instances on points, and Shift D it and drag it upwards. What we can do next is take the geometry and plug it into the points of the instances. So now we have 3 points, one here, and one here. And then on those points, we're going to instance the same exact mesh line as the one down here. So we have the exact height that we need. Then to actually give this some thickness, what we'll do is we will select the curved circle and the curve to mesh, Shift D that and drag it up. Then we will take the instances and plug it in right here. To actually join these two together, we're going to add in a join geometry node. So click on the geometry and select join. Then we'll plug this in. You might notice though you get this error, and the reason for that is because we're actually trying to drag a mesh into a curve socket. That's not going to work, so we need to actually convert it. To do that, go over to mesh and then click on mesh to curve and place it here. Once we do this, you can see here is the effect and it's actually working properly. We can control the radius by changing this value right here, and we're going to set this down to a value of 0.05 and enter. The other thing I'll do is I'll click on fill caps so it actually fills up the top right there, as you can see. If you get the fence actually peeking through the object, what you can do is select your chain link, go into edit mode and drag it along the right until it is inside, as you can see, and that looks a lot better. The other issue that we have is it's not tall enough. Since the origin point of this chain link is right there, it's actually stopping right at that point. We can actually fix this by adding over to this count. But if we were to drag this up, you're going to notice this object is not going up as well. So what we need to do instead is over in the group input, we're going to take this and plug it into the count. Then we're going to take the count and plug it into this count. So as we change, if we select our object, if we change the count over in this modifier, it's going to move it upwards, as you can see. But what we'll do here is we will add in a utilities and a math node. We're going to set it to add, and then the value down here, we're going to go up to 2. So it's going to take the 21, as you can see here, and then add 2, so it's actually 23, and as you can see, it's now taller than it. The next thing that we will do is we're going to add in some horizontal poles going along the top and the bottom, and however many that you want in the middle. This is actually pretty easy to do as well. What we'll do is we'll take the mesh line, we're going to press Ctrl Shift D and drag it upwards. Ctrl Shift D allows you to keep the connection of the count, as you can see. The next thing that we need to do is actually take the fence line, this object here, we're going to press Shift D and drag it up as well. So how this is going to work is we're going to take the mesh line, which is the height, and we're going to add the fence line on that endpoint at the top here. To do this, we need to reverse this mesh line so it starts at the top and goes downwards. So when we set the count of the horizontal poles to 1, it's always going to be 1 right here rather than 1 down here. We're going to go over to mesh and then click on mesh to curve. And then we're going to reverse this by going over to curve and then clicking on reverse curve. Plug that in here. So now it's actually starting up at the top. At this point, we can instance the fence line at the top here. So we'll go over to instances on points. We'll take the curve, plug it in here, and then the geometry, we'll plug it into the instance. Oh, I didn't plug it in. There we go, like that. But we also want a way to actually add in more horizontal poles if we wanted to. And to do that, we're going to add in a curve and then a resample curve and place it here. And that's basically all we really need to do. Let's take a look at this by dragging the instances into the group output. So if we were to come over to the resample, if we drag this down to a value of 1, there's going to be one curve along the top, as you can see. If we drag it to 2, there's going to be one at the bottom, and then 3, one in the middle, and then it's just going to keep adding, as we can see, and we have full control over how many poles are in the middle. Let's give this some thickness by going over to a curve to mesh, which is right here, curve to mesh. We'll place it there. Then we will add in another curved circle and use that for the thickness. So add in a curved circle and plug it in. The radius is way too high, so let's drag this down to a value of 0.0, let's go with 0.25 just to see how that looks. That looks pretty good. We might need to play around with it. Let's actually plug it into the join geometry and then plug this into the group output so we can see what it looks like. If I zoom in here, you're going to notice that we have an issue. The horizontal pole is inside all of these chain links. An easy way to fix that, to push it outwards, is to add in a transform node. If we go over to geometry and then add in a transform node, we'll place it right here. And then over in the translate, if we drag this down to a value of negative 0.025 and enter, it's going to move it out just slightly. You might be thinking that the transform node is actually just going to push the whole thing along the X direction. So if we were to extrude this outwards, it's not going to work. But as you can see, it's still working. Even if we extrude it out this way, the horizontal pole is on the outside. The reason that is happening is because we placed the transform node before this profile curve. If we were to place this on this side, that's not going to work because it's just going to move it along the X direction, as you can see here. But since we placed it here before the profile curve, it's actually working properly. I'm not really sure how it works that way, but that's just how it is, and it's a solution for this problem. And there we go, that is basically it. Now if we drag this up, we can add in more horizontal poles if we wanted to, and you have full control over how it works. What I'll do here is I will take another output and plug it into the count of the resample. Then we can press N and go over to the bottom one. This is the horizontal poles, so we will go horizontal poles. And then for this one right here, this is the height, so we will call this height. And there we go. If we then select our node here, we have those organized perfectly. To create this, we're going to come down here to the bottom. We will select the fence line, Shift D it, and place it over here just to make sure everything is separated and organized. And let's take a look at this by plugging it into the geometry. So we can see here is what it looks like. What we're going to do now is resample this and add in points along this line. We're going to add in a curve and then a resample. We'll place it right here. Then we're going to change it over to count. And so for every 0.1 meters, there's going to be a horizontal pole. Next up, we will take this object here. We're going to press Control Shift D and then move it down here so it actually keeps the count. And this is going to be what's instance. We're going to add in an instances on points. And then we'll take the mesh line, plug that in. And we can see here's all of our horizontal lines. And we can change the count if you wanted to. So if you want less, you can drag that outwards. Then to actually give this some thickness, we need to add in all of those nodes that we added previously. We first need to convert it over to a curve. So we will go mesh to curve, and then we will go curve to mesh so we can actually fill in a profile. And then we will add in a circle right here, curve primitives, curve circle, and then plug it in right there. We'll click on fill caps and then drag the radius down. If we then plug this into the rest of the nodes, we will take the mesh, plug it into the join geometry, and then this into the group input. Here is the effect that we get. We'll come back down here and set the radius. Let's go with a value of 0.025, the same as the horizontal poles. You might notice though we have the same problem. It's in the middle rather than on the edge. Now we're going to use a similar method to what we used up here with the horizontal poles, but it's going to be a little bit different. We're going to be placing it before the instances. So what I'll do is I'll just grab this curved circle and this curve to mesh, Shift D it, and place it over here. We're going to take the resample, plug it into the curve, and then the mesh into the points. And we can see here we're instancing a lot of points. But rather than a thick radius, we're going to set the radius down to 0. Then all we have to do is use that same transform node. So we'll come up to the top here, the one with the negative X value. We're going to Shift D it, drag it all the way down here and place it here. Once we do that, it's going to move them backwards. Now, I'm not sure if there's a way to fix that, if there is a better way to move them backwards rather than using the profile curve and then transforming that. If you know a better method, let me know in the comments down below. But as you can see, if we go along the back here, it's still working, and all of those are along the edges rather than the middle. Then what we can do is we can take another output and plug it into the length. So here we're going to take the output, plug it into the resample length. So if we drag this down, it's going to add in more. If we drag it up, it's going to add in less. And that is basically it. If you wanted to add in a material, all you have to do is click on the material and then click on set material and then place a material that you want. In this case, we can go over to the material tab. We can call this material metal and then give it a metallic look. And then the base color, we can give it a black, and then the roughness, just drag it down. You could go into the shader editor and add in some other stuff like some grunge, some scratches and whatnot, but I'll leave that up to you guys. Then over in the set material node, just select the metal material. If we go into rendered view, we can see it is working perfectly. But there you go, that is how you create a chain link fence using geometry nodes. There is one problem though, and I'll show you that real quick, is if we drag the length up a little bit, you're gonna notice that some of the horizontal poles get really close to the edge of these poles. And I'm not really sure how to fix that. If there's a way to average these points, just the end points with the middle, and then distribute those inside that. I don't really know how to do that, but if you guys know, let me know in the comments down below. But that is it. From here, you can play around with the shape. You can grab the fence align curve, extrude it outwards, extrude it all around, and create the shape that you want. But that is it, guys. Thank you very much for watching this tutorial. I know it was a long one, but hopefully you created something cool. And if you found it useful and you use it in your own projects, let me know in the comments. Or if you created something, send it to me on Instagram at BlenderMadeEasy. Thanks again to Skillshare for sponsoring this video, and I will see you all in the next one.